Hi, this is Eugene from Economics at Tuition Genius. Welcome to our 4th episode of Circuit Breaker Economics. I hope everybody is safe and sound at home and that we are all looking forward to seeing you on 2nd June for classes if the government finally allows us to resume our lessons. Right, and today we are going to discuss and debate a very hotly discussed issue recently, which is about how crampy our foreign workers' dormitories are. Now, Singapore's COVID-19 cases have crossed 20,000 in the last week, and a large part of it is because of transmission amongst foreign workers. So there has been a lot of blame going on that the government has not done enough. Employers are cruel to let their foreign workers stay in such crampy living conditions that foreign workers do not have enough space. Right, so I thought today we will discuss this further from an economics point of view. Now, if you ask me for my personal opinion, I feel that as human beings, we should do more to take care of people who are working for us, and that will be our foreign workers. So I do think that we should provide better living conditions for them, ensure that their workers' dormitories are not placed for transmission of disease, and we can definitely do more in terms of hygiene, in terms of safety standards, in terms of living conditions. I think we can do more on all areas. But I have some questions that I'd like to discuss and debate with all of you. Now, first of all, to provide better living conditions, the first question I have is, who pays? There are a few variants of this. Let's break this down slowly. Let's look at the first situation where a lot of people seem to have this opinion that employers should pay for our foreign workers to have better living conditions. Let's do a breakdown of how much do foreign workers cost to hire and employ. Now, first of all, their average salary is, I read it in the newspapers that it was about $1,000. Foreign worker levy is about $750, so $1,000 plus about $750. And the cost to house them in these foreign workers' dormitories costs about $200 to $300. Let's put the average to be about $250. So $1,000 plus $750 plus $250, that rounds off to approximately $2,000 to hire a foreign worker. So if it costs about $2,000 to hire a foreign worker, let's make this as simple as possible. Let's say to improve the living conditions of foreign workers, we will need to double the accommodation cost from 250 to 500. And if we make this simple assumption that if you double the cost, they will get twice the amount of living space, twice the amount of amenities, and better food possibly. So the question here then lies, who pays? Who pays for this extra $250? And I think most people will have this impression or opinion that it should be the employers who should be responsible to pay for this. When we make the employer pay, there are 3 scenarios that we can consider. First scenario, the employer has substantial market power, so the employer is able to pass on this cost, this extra $250 monthly to consumers in terms of higher prices of the final output of the goods or service that they provide. So consumers will see an increase in prices of goods and services in our economy. If you think that, how much can it go up by? I don't have an idea either, but I can tell you that there will be an impact on the prices of goods and services. Because why? Foreign workers form a quite sizable proportion of our labor force, and they kind of help to keep our cost of production low to some extent, right? And why 300,000 is not a small number? We have 300,000 foreign workers. They form quite a substantial proportion of our labor force. So we will expect that if employers of these foreign workers can pass on this higher cost to consumers, they will, because firms dare to make profits. They have to answer to their shareholders. So if they can pass on this cost to the consumers, they would. So they will pass on this cost to the consumers, right? That's the first scenario. So are we as individuals, as households, as consumers willing to pay more for our goods and services in general? Are we willing to see that perhaps, say for example, prices of goods and services in general go up about 5-10%? Maybe I'm pulling this figure randomly, it's not even real, but let's say it's 5-10%. Are we willing as consumers to pay more for everything in the economy, from food to housing to services in general? Are we willing to pay more? The second scenario is some firms do not have substantial market power. They are unable to raise their prices of their final output of goods and services, so they may have to absorb this higher cost if they are mandated by the government to do so. But if they have to pay for this higher cost and they cannot increase their price, then they may end up making a loss, and if they end up making a loss, they might close down. So in that case, all the foreign workers from these firms will lose their job. There's a possibility. That is the second scenario. Now, let's look at a third possible scenario. If we increase this accommodation cost and we make the employer pay, and the employer decides that, okay, I'm going to try to increase my productivity of each individual worker and hire less foreign workers. So let's say if I used to hire 50 foreign workers, I'll ask myself, can I work with 40 so that my budget remains the same but I hire less? So you have 10 foreign workers now losing their job, they get sent back to their home country. 40 foreign workers, their livelihoods are improved in terms of their living conditions, but 10 get sent back home. So we're transferring benefits from one group of people to another group of people. Is that something that is good to hear? Right, this is something that we should think about as well. So these are three potential and possible scenarios we should think about if we were to get employers to fork the cost. Some people have this opinion that, okay, the government can fork the cost. If the government actually extracts $750 of foreign worker levy, they can pass on this $250 to the producer and say, hey, take this $250 reduction and make sure you put this extra $250 to improve the standards of living for your foreign workers. We have to bear in mind that this $750 foreign worker levy adds to our tax collections. These tax collections are collectively used to fund government expenditure. They are used to fund building of roads, building of schools, hospitals, etc. It goes into the general tax pool. Okay, so when we take this money out, $250 out, and then to improve the living conditions of foreign workers. So the next question that some people will ask is this: why don't we take this $250 and improve the living conditions of our poorest 5% of Singapore citizens? There will be people who will think that way, and it's not quite unreasonable to think that way. If the government were to take this $250 cost savings and redirect it to improve the living standards of foreign workers, why don't we use this to take care of our own? Okay, and then there will be another group of people who will say, why don't we take the money and then the government fork out extra money and we improve the living conditions of both foreign workers and also as well as poorest 5% of Singapore? Actually, that's not too terrible an idea. It's really down to your point of view, that whether you feel that, because of our prudence, Singapore now has the firepower to actually deal with this COVID-19 crisis in terms of fiscal policy, or you feel that, we could be doing even more. Okay, but if we get the government to pay, the idea and concept here is that there is an opportunity cost. Everything you decide on, there could be potentially somewhere else that you could have repurposed these funds for. And people will be asking, why is the government taking money to improve living conditions of foreign workers when we should be taking the money to improve the living conditions of our poorest 5% of our population? So here's another even better way to think about this. Let's say we have already come to a conclusion on this, that okay, we have decided, okay, for employer pay, or we have decided government pay. Then let's switch this around in terms of perspective. Why haven't we gone to the foreign workers and ask them, okay, if we had this opportunity, why don't we go to the foreign workers themselves and ask them, now if we were to take another $250, we can use this $250 to improve your living conditions, or we can give you this $250 outright in cash. What will you pick? This is something that I would think about, that if I was a worker receiving $1,000 in wage and I'm here in this country because I want to work and I want to send back money to my family, and I got $250 an increase in pay, I could actually go finish my job earlier because my savings would be more substantial and I could go home earlier. Would I not want that? I cannot answer for foreign workers, but I think this is something good to be thinking about. Why don't we take this $250 and give it to them to increase their wage? Right, so this is also another question to think about. And if we were to increase their wage, then might we be better off relying less on foreign workers? Because if you do the total calculations, $1,000 plus $750 foreign worker levy plus $500 in accommodation, that's 2.25k. So it could be potentially high enough to actually entice some locals to work the job of foreign workers, because 2.25 is a relatively high enough pay to actually entice local workers to take up these jobs. So would that be possible as well to think about? Okay, so in summary, here are some things to conclude off with. Number one, if we were to improve their living condition, who pays? If it's employers who should pay, then are you willing to pay more as a consumer for final prices of goods and services? And if it was the government that were to pay, then would it be possible that we could also have used this for other purposes, like perhaps provide more healthcare spending for the lowest income groups of Singapore citizens? Or if we did find the money for foreign workers to improve their living conditions, should we use it to improve their living conditions, or should we use it to increase the pay? And if that's the case, if their pay goes up, then might it be better for us to use local workers instead of foreign workers to do the same job? So I hope you found this week's episode interesting. We'll catch you on the next episode. See you!